All right, hello. And this session, I'm going to try to go over some of the last minute details for formatting your research paper as we come down to the end of the semester. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen, which has the APSA style manual. Hopefully by now y'all have already been reading this and following most of it because again, if you read your guidelines, it tells you right there, you got to use the APSA style manual, and it is provided for free. It is in the references. So if you just go to those references, it's not that hard to find. If you did a Google search on it, this is actually provided by APSA for free, and you could actually just access it on their webpage as well. All right, so just a few things. Number one, of course, what you want to do is make sure you get formatting correct because it is 60% of the grade of the paper overall. Now, if you look at that, part of that includes some things that are like spelling, grammatical and punctuation rules, those mechanics of writing. Um, but um, there are a few specific things to the style here that might differ from what you were taught in elementary, middle school, and high school. Just a little bit. All right, first thing is your layout. You want to have your title page, your abstract on there, the manuscript. Your name should not appear on it whatsoever. You probably will not have any notes since you can do the parenthetical citations, but you do want the reference list. Now, if you do any tables, those should not be in the middle of the paper. I know it could be tempting because some people think if they've got a half-page long chart, just throw this in here and it makes me get to my 5 pages easier, but it does not. You have to have 5 pages of text, so I would discount that, and you'd still have to have 5 pages of text, but you'd also take a ding on formatting because it goes, as you can see, at the very end. With that said, I've never had anyone who actually turned in a table, a chart, or anything like that. And if you've got the data from that, you should be able to talk about it in writing without putting a whole table, chart, or something in a 5 page paper. Now, you get to the point where you're doing 20 or 30 pages, that's a different story. Headings, one thing you should note here, um, you should not use them. This is a short paper, so headings are for longer papers, and you should not use them in this whatsoever. All right. Body text, everything should be normal font, no underline, no boldface, unless it's something that specifically requires it. For example, if you've got a journal article, that should be in quotations, but if you reference the journal itself, um, that should be italicized. So avoid it in your own writing. Use it only where it is absolutely required, right? And then a lot of the software stuff here basically is going to note some things because we do everything by computer these days. But first, you want to do a final check before you get this in here. Make sure that you look at all those quotations. Note that you really should not use a lot of quotations in here. I would reserve those for when the person says something with such, I don't know, artistry or profoundness that you cannot say it or even come close to saying it as well as they did to achieve the same point. You know, for example, if you were quoting Martin Luther King, you're not going to be as eloquent as he was in his I Have a Dream speech. But if it's something just, you know, raw data, you know, verbiage that you can put in your own words, that's what you need to do. Please note that you still need to have your parenthetical citation at the end of that. All right. Most of this other stuff is going to be things for longer papers. All right. Notice that there is, I'm not going to go over this, but there is a punctuation guide, capitalization guide, and there are a few things about spelling. All right. These usually relate to abbreviations, as you can see. Make sure if you do something like, as you can see here, the United Nations, make sure the first time you use that in your paper that you write it out, the United States would be more common for us. But after you say the United States, you can then in parentheses say US, and then every other time you talk about the United States, you can just put US. Um, there are some things, like I said, that we commonly use, ATM, DIY, IQ, that are basically become like words into themselves. But if you're abbreviating an official organization, then follow that rule. There's a bunch of other stuff here about when to abbreviate and how to abbreviate and spelling or non-spelling on that. Names, make sure that you use the appropriate titles and phrasing. Notice that if you talked about Kamala Harris, when this was written, she was still a senator. It was Senator abbreviated Kamala Harris, but if you use her last name only, then it is Senator Harris, right? Right. Grammar, there are a few specific rules, but nothing that really deviates. So you should be able to look at that yourself and figure those out. Same kind of things. Again, the spelling is usually going to relate more to capitalization and abbreviations and how you should properly do those. All right. What we do want to look at here is our parenthetical citations. This is the most important thing. A lot of people will have citations and they will look like this top one on there because they read general format and don't go any farther than that. If you have, and you should have, a journal article, then you should have a page number where you get that piece of information. So this is not what you should use. Now, if you have a primary source that was on a website and there's no page number, this is what you do. If you have a page number, this is what you do. Jentleson 2015, comma, and then the pages or page range that you found that specific piece of information. If you've got a quotation, then you only find that quotation on one page. So that would be, for example, Jentleson 12 to 13, maybe, if it was the last line on the page 13 and carried over to 13 to the next page. But chances are it's going to be just 12. You don't find a quote over 2 pages usually, unless it's a longer one. Now, if you put that in your own words, it's the same thing. You take that quotation and you reword it in your own words, but that was all on page 12, then you have to put page 12, not this one at the top. That's only if you do not have a page number or if you're talking about the whole article. All right. All right. Another thing that came up today as I went through drafts, make sure that if you've got something that is a court case, that you italicize the name of the case. Technically, the V should not be, but I actually don't deduct for that. The baker in the car, you can see are italicized, include the year, and then, you know, if you italicize the V, I'm not going to take off points for that. All right. Over here, you know, books and articles, make sure you follow their formats and make sure every semester I'll have maybe 10% of the students who do a bunch of parenthetical citations and then they do not put together this reference list at the end. That is essential. It is a requirement and you need to have it in there. All right. So I'm going to take a shift over here and I'm going to look at the, sample paper so you can see how this should all look. All right, right here, you can see a cover page, all right? And basically nothing after that has a name on it. Some of you may be used to MLA where I believe the page number goes at the top right with your last name. That is going to be, if you have, say, 7 pages of text where you have them numbered, that will be 7 deductions, not 1, because you made the mistake on every page. We do not put last names in APSA. As you saw, the reason why is because everything should be anonymous. When people look at these papers to review, they take the cover page off and they read the text. And to avoid bias because of who you know, you don't put a last name. All right. That is the purpose behind that. It really doesn't matter what the purpose is because you're supposed to do what the rules say, and we do not do last names. All right, here you can see some of those citations, parenthetical citations. You notice they can be in the sentence, right? Notice that if you end the sentence, you put the parenthetical citation, then the period at the end, right? Again, a little very common mistake. Try not to make it. The formatting of the paper itself, notice the abstract is single spaced. Put that line in after that, then the entirety of the paper is double spaced. I'm going to show you some of the most common errors before we quit, and this is the most common one. And I will be on this recording, or I will be doing this in class, going over the most common errors, and I will say 60% of people will not double space properly. And I will tell those people, like I'm telling you 60% of you won't do it right, and you will still go and make the same error. So please do not do that, and pay attention when we get to that section. All right. As you can see, page numbers are at the bottom there. If you do a block quote, please note that it is single spaced. It is indented. Every line is indented. But you do double space before and after. The whole point of a block quote is to set it apart from the rest of the text. So if you don't double space before and after, it defeats the whole purpose of doing it as a block quote. So make sure you get that in there is right. To be honest, you should not have a block quote in a paper this short. Your paper should not be more than 10% made up of someone else's words, even counting for quotations and attribution. You should therefore take something this long and shorten it up and see what you really need out of it and include only that, and perhaps even better, reword it to your own words. Right now, you may see some references to notes. We do not do those for citations. Any notes are informational. I've never had anyone who's done one in a paper this short, and y'all really shouldn't need them here. All right. Margins, by the way, are going to be pretty simple. They are 1 inch all around, top, bottom, left, and right. Make sure you do your page number in the header or footer, because if you try to type it in, it will mess things up on the rest of your formatting, and it will not be in the right spot. So please put that in at the header or footer. All right. Some other common errors when we come down here to the very end of this paper. I'm going to show you that we have a reference list here. Right. Notice a few things. Number one, the first line is not indented. All the others are. So this one has 3 lines. You'll see 2 and 3 are indented. This one's got 2, 3, and 4. The first line is on the margin. That is called a hanging indent, and you can set the paragraph up to do that so that you don't have to worry about it. All right. If you just type it out and then go copy and paste them all and apply the hanging indent, it'll do it there as well. All right. Please also note, if you've done MLA or APA, I believe they double space these, and we do not. That would be an error in all 10 of these. So basically, you'd be starting off in the F range if you double space your works cited. You single space them, and then again, the whole point is to make them distinct from each other. So I don't know why they do that, because that defeats the whole purpose. This way I can scan through, and honestly, it takes me about that long to grade the whole thing as far as formatting. All right. And the reason why is because you single space and then you double space to separate them out, so I can glance at the key elements and know that I'm moving from one to the other instead of scanning through it and trying to figure out where one starts and stops first. So note titles of chapters or the actual article title are in quotations. This is a better example. This is more like something that you would use. It's an article. Nothing is done to the text except putting it in quotations. It's not bold. It's not italicized. All right. The journal title is italicized. All right. You can see that on this one too. Journal article, just quotations. Journal itself, italicized. Now, you may have this as your volume number, volume 7. Down here, this one says VOL dot and then 41, so you know it's a volume number. You basically take this from the way the journal presents it. So if they just write their volume out like this with a number, right, and that's going to be your page range, that's fine. This might be volume 41. It might be in Roman numerals instead of Arabic numerals. Some might have a season or a month instead of a number. But whatever the volume is, you just word it the way that particular journal words it. Same thing with the number. Write the issue number right to there. You just word it the way they do. Chances are this is not going to change much. You don't really do the numbers in Roman numerals or anything like that for the issues. All right, this number here is a range, 213 to 227. That means the first page of that article is on 213, and the very last page, which might have and probably was, the works cited or the references or whatever they called it, 227. You go all the way and start on the first page, and you go all the way inclusive of anything besides text. It's actually part of that article to list the last page. If you got your documents, your sources in Galileo or JSTOR, you probably already have that because it will provide a citation for you, right? But basically, this is how you format it. And again, that's a very common mistake. I know a lot of people, big error, they will go through and they will do MLA. And if you just look at that, you can see it does not look anything like MLA or APA. So make sure you use APSA. All right. All right. Now with that, I'm going to switch over to a few well, I guess we call these sample papers. And this one, I'm going to actually change this a little bit so that we can blow it up a little bit. All right. This is bigger than you would see. This is actually a history one, but basically the style is very similar. One of the things I want y'all to see is they had footnotes, so you don't. So that's one thing. Now, when I said double space, I said 60% of y'all make that error. This is where that error is made. If you can see what I'm highlighting there, it's basically the transition. That should have been a separate paragraph right there. But if you look at the gap between that line that starts international and personal, and then you compare it to the gap between that and the next paragraph, you should know that there is space between both lines, and the second one is more than the first. So this is actually a very simple fix. You may have typed out the whole paper, just highlight the whole thing and go to your paragraph menu. Most of us will get this part where we put double spacing on there just fine. What you need to do to prevent this is to go here to that little corner arrow box, whatever it is, and you'll note here it says double spacing. That's what we want. But if you come over here where it says spacing and it says before 8 points, change that to 0. And if you look right between the two paragraphs, you will see when I hit return how that shrinks up. So in other words, you'll be getting a deduction every single time you move from one paragraph to another, right? If you don't do that, because your paper will not be double spaced. It will be mostly double spaced, which is not the requirement, right? This one also had, if you remember over there, just make sure basic stuff that when you start a paragraph that you tab over, little things like that, right? Actually count a lot, right? The margins here are all good. Here you can see that same thing. You got that kind of gap in there that's a little bigger. I know if I can see it, as old as I am, you should be able to, because your eyes, I'm thinking, are much younger than mine. I think all my students this semester, or almost all of them, are high school students, so I know they are. Now, this part actually looks good. I think I may have formatted this in class one time. This one you see is double spaced. So that's the same thing. I do not want that. That should be single spaced like that. All the rest of these also are double spaced. Sometimes it doesn't make a difference because that's only one line. I can also see that there's a much bigger gap between there though. So if I take a look at these, I should only be double spaced between. So what I'm looking at is single spacing that. Let's see what that does to us. And I think what happened was they had something where they were double spacing and hitting it twice. So what they were doing was basically quadruple spacing. So avoid that. All right. Um, hopefully y'all have better sources than this person again. Notice websites are not allowed as sources. But as I said, you can find a primary source on a web page, which is what this person did. They found a copy of the Geneva Convention on history.com. So if you put history.com as your source, you basically are losing points in the sources. But if you tell me this is what I'm looking at on there and that the document is there, that's fine. In this case, I can't remember if that was an article about it or not, but just so you notice that um, basically is the rule. You can find a web page like this one, definitely has an account, a person's account of the POW's treatment in World War II. So that is a primary document. That is not a secondary document. This might be a web page based on this, but I know from the way they worded this that it's actually a primary document. All right. Okay. Take a look at a couple others here. Oh, looks like they did not download properly. That's fine. I'll just open them up again. All right. And oh crap. Oh, what happened there? Did I turn this whole thing off? I did not. Okay. All right. So I want to share again. I'm going to close these extra word things that did not open up properly. And then I will get back on track here with you. Okay, now there we go. Sorry for that delay. Here we go. Okay, same thing, cover page again, looks pretty good. The spacing and everything on this paper looks correct. All right. There are some problems with their footnotes, but we don't have to do those, so we don't have to worry about them. Just pay attention to make sure you're consistent. Down here, I can see there's that extra space there, and if I go to my paragraph menu, you can see that it is this time after adding 0.8, and I can bring that up. All right. Reason I'm changing these back, by the way, is so I can use them next semester. Reference list, let's see, it looks mostly good in the way it's formatted. I think this is odd here, and I think I may have cut that off in class one time when we're using that. These have some extra spacing in between, so clean that up. This one was important because notice here, this is especially important because I know some of you, if you're using like OYES to get court cases, it will produce a citation for you. Galileo will do that for most of the things that you use. And if you copy and paste it, number one, make sure that you get the proper indentation and line spacing and all that, because it's formatted for a web page when you download it, and you got to reformat it for those things when you get over here. It should have the author's name, title, and all that stuff in the order it's supposed to, but you got to actually put it into this kind of, hanging indent, single space, double space between format yourself. All right, now, if you look at that one and you look at the ones above it, you'll see these are all in Times New Roman. And then we come down here, this one's in something else. It's Merriweather Songs. And if you look at the size, you see it's 9. And if I come over here, I'll look, my normal font all the way through the paper was 12. So that's obviously not good. You want to make sure that you get it as Times New Roman, and that you also get it to be the same size as the others. So that is a common error that people make when they start copying citations from other sources. You might have, again, Galileo will provide sources, citations, and so will some of the primary source things like OYES does that as well. There are citation generators. So if you find one that does APSA and you use that, make sure that you are consistent with the whole paper as far as your font. Notice the font in the paper was Times New Roman size 12. That's what the reference list and everything else should also be. All right. Now, let's stop that one, and we're going to switch over to a third one. Okay, this looks like it must have been a world history class. All right. Looks okay. I mean, you should not have anything like this in your header or footer, right? You just have a page number and that's all. No names. You don't put anything about your title or anything. This is a person who did not get their topic approved. So this is an F paper off the top because to do the Roman Empire thoroughly, you'd actually probably have to write, um, oh, I don't know, 300 or 400 pages at least to do even a noticeable job. There's a guy named Edward Gibbons who did just a decline and fall of the Roman Empire, and that's, oh, I don't know, a multi-volume set that's probably about like 4,000 pages. So you're trying to sum all that up in 5 pages. That's going to be a bad grade. So basically, this was bad off the start. This one I usually use because there's a few things you can notice about it. Number one, be careful. I always tell people to run a spell check and look for these words. If the word is underlined, that tells you that it might be spelled incorrectly. Now, this is a proper noun. It's a name. So it tells you it might be, not that it is. So don't just automatically click through their suggestions because this is actually spelled right. Right. Watch some of these too, because Civil War here comes up lowercase, like it should in this context, because you're talking about a civil war. If you are talking about the Civil War, then both will be capitalized. Make sure you watch for proper nouns. Court cases are proper nouns. They're usually people's names or state and a person's name. Right. But you will also have a lot of people do the Bill of Rights and they will make that lowercase. That's a proper noun. Bill and rights are capitalized. The Constitution, like the United States Constitution or the Constitution of the state of Georgia. It's not just ours, it's any country or state's constitution is capitalized. That's an official title. But you could talk about all 180 governments in the world have a constitution. That's lowercase because you're not talking about any specific constitution. So be careful of those. It's basically the same concept. All right, this one got deductions every time they put their name up there, which is why that is blacked out. That's keeping their name from showing. All right. This was an F paper, first because of the topic, and they didn't do the 5 pages. This should be a 1, by the way. Your first page of text is where you should actually start. So this was an error on every single page, including this one, because there should be no number on the title page. This should be the first page number, and it should start with 1. Not that many, they were already in the F range because they basically had 1 page, and I don't know, not even quite a fourth on that. So that's basically automatically in the F range. Completely failed their sources because sources are 20%. That's instantly a 0 because there's nothing there but secondary sources that are on web pages. All right. So there were a lot of errors in that. That is somebody who probably didn't do anything. That could be one of y'all. I know some people where I left feedback on their topics and they still have not actually gone back and changed their topic or narrowed it down usually. All right. So there likely will be some people every semester that will turn in something like that, but avoid that. Chances are you won't be that bad if you're watching this recording and have been following up this whole time. Now this cover page, that title is off because it should not be all caps. It should just be a regular title font. That means these should be capitalized, the first one, I, but then the O and the T should not be. The Supreme Court decision S, C, and D should be capitalized. This of should not be. And then, of course, Plessy versus Ferguson should be, and it's italicized because it's a case name. That's perfectly acceptable. Right. One thing I would say is some people send me drafts. If I give you feedback, you actually have to do it. This note in here says add footnote text to all their footnotes. Again, for you it'd be parenthetical citations, but they did not do that. They left those blanks and submitted it like that. So I don't know why you're even going to send me something to get your draft looked at if you make zero of the actual changes. Um, if I make those suggestions on spelling, and you're going to see it with red underlined, and that means to go in and change it. It doesn't mean it's fixed. If you turn it in where I have commented on it, made the change, and it's highlighted in red, that means you've got to go in and accept it. If you turn it in with me having changed it and it's still in red, underlined, or crossed through, I should say, then it will not be. That will be a mistake every time you did it. I'm not fixing it for you. I'm making suggestions. So you have to make sure that you put all those in there, and I'll show all markup. You can see some of those were in there. So I did fix the word analyze and torture and Americans there, as you can see. Those are still spelling and formatting errors because they did not actually go back and fix it in this case, right? Now, when they did this, by the way, all of those were underlined in red. And you will see some things where there were words underlined in red, right, in various papers. What that means is spell check is automatic. Now, you don't have to run it at the end like you did when I was, you know, first starting to use Word. The word is probably misspelled, so you might want to go back and check it. If I see something, and I will see one where I open it up and there's a bunch of underlined in red stuff, and you turn it in that way, um, you should expect to not do well because you didn't do anything. Now, some of these, like if you look at favor, it's underlined because we are in America, and that's how we spell the word in Britain, not over here. We take the U out. Depending on how you use it, it's usually acceptable if you do quotations and they've got that U in there. We typically don't see that for the American government class, but you might, especially if you reference like a court case that's a precedent that's still, you know, in vogue, still is good law, and it was maybe 1800, early 1800s, it might actually be spelled with some of those older spellings. And that's actually fine. You don't have to do anything to change that. Now, blue underlining like this is a grammatical error. This person starts a quotation properly with 3 periods. Right? Now, the problem is they didn't format that right. That if I do this, that actually changes those 3 periods to 3 separate characters to 1 character with the 3 in it. And basically counts it as 1 letter. Right? But basically, you can use those ellipses. That's fine. Here they did parentheticals, which is what you're supposed to do, so it didn't help them much. But um, if you have something where it is spelled, if it's wrong or whatever, this one might be acceptable because it's a British. But if you do a quotation and they spelled something wrong, then put this bracket, SIC period, and that tells me the spacing. The issue was theirs, not, they made the mistake. You're just copying it exactly like they did it. That's what that basically means. If you don't put that in there, then I don't know whether they spelled it wrong or you spelled it wrong, and the assumption is that you spelled it wrong. So be careful of those. All right, over here you can see that all of a sudden this is a block quote. Like I said, a lot of people would do these. This should be sorry, wrong menu, single spaced, right? But now I'm good at the top, but notice it's also supposed to be single spaced and double spaced between that and the main text. So make sure you fix that too. All right. Again, you preferably don't have any of those. If you do, make sure they are, done right and probably shorter than these. All right. This is a person who had that error. I can tell that 0 point was what I did for the formatting change, so they should have, gone through accepted those. Basically, that was that spacing issue, right? There is no reference list here, so this person actually got a 0 on the sources. Regardless of what you do up here, you can put a footnote with a source pretty much everywhere. This is my main list of sources, and it does not exist. It's a 0. That's 20 points off the top. So this person had a bunch of errors up here. So they're starting with the maximum is an 80, and then I'm deducting from there. With all the fact that they did their sources, every single one of them wrong, they're in the F range for that. So, those little things add up greatly. So make sure that you go in and actually fix those. Again, if you see something like you open up and you have a bunch of red underlining, make sure you go back and run a spell check. If you see blue underlining, it's grammar, so it's the same thing. But those things are telling you something might be wrong. Don't trust it, because what you have might actually be correct, especially for proper nouns. If you write something that's, you know, if it's law, it might have Latin phrases. All right. If you're doing something that involves, oh, I don't know, immigration, you might have Spanish or Chinese or any language in the world. And if you write another language, it's going to use an English dictionary, so it might underline it like it's possibly wrong. So don't just go in and change it. Make sure and double check your spelling against, if it's Spanish, the Spanish word, or if it's Latin, a Latin word. All right, but don't, you know, don't go in and take something that's right and then make a mistake and turn it into that, so you get points deducted when you were perfectly fine. But on the other hand, make sure you look. If you got like every third word is in underlined in red, then you probably do have some misspellings in there. All right. Basically, that is it. And I'm going to cut this now. Um, Again, paper's due on Friday, so you do still have a short window. It's getting to the point where I will not have time to read them and get them back to you. So I would say probably today is the last day that you could actually send in a draft and expect to get some feedback. Hopefully your content is good, because chances are at this point, those simple things like the formatting are all that I could really make any significant comments on. So with that, I'm cutting this one off, and make sure that you take the time and review those before you submit. The reason you see so many errors usually is because people wait till 5 minutes before it's due, and then they don't have time to go back and even glance at it to make sure that they've actually fixed all these formatting problems. So make sure you take that time to do that. All right, thank you.